Hi, Write Writers. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, we're going to be looking at Accuplacer Writeplacer essays where students scored a 3. And the question is, why did I score a 3 on my Writeplacer essay? So let's take a look at sample essay number 1. Honestly, I think we should be able to make our own decisions because it is our life. We can do whatever we want with it. If we go through rough obstacles, we have to manage to work them out. Some of us might even be successful with our decision or not. You chose your own decision. You should not have to be limited on your choices that you make. Some people might not like the fact that they cannot go over a certain amount of decisions they make. One example is you are going to a store to buy some groceries. You see a delicious candy bar. You are not sure if you should take it. It is your decision. In today's world, we are not limited on our decisions. We can make millions of decisions in life. Maybe you should just overthink it and make the good decisions at least. We are responsible enough to make our own decisions. We should need to have someone near us telling you, you have gone over your limit of decisions. If you are mature enough to do the right things, you are old enough to make your own decisions, but the good ones. Yes, some people would choose the wrong decision, but it was their own choice. I am against us people today having to be limited in the choices you make. I agree that it is better to just be responsible and make and choose your own decision. You are an adult. Now, some people will be totally against that. But I am very thankful that now, the time I'm living in, we make and choose our own decisions. We do not need anybody to be telling us what we can or cannot do. In conclusion, today we do not have to be limited over the choices we make. We can make and choose our own decisions. We are free to make and choose our own decisions. All right, writers. So reading this essay, and again, that's what's called a cold read. So I try to do this unrehearsed as much as possible so that, again, I'm not looking at the material ahead of time. And if I slip up in the reading, that's definitely a sign that there are some bumpy parts in the writing. And again, if you think about it, someone who's scoring, the person who's scoring these essays is looking at the essay for the first time. And so that really sets us up for understanding what it's like from the grader's point of view. Let's talk about the positives and focus on that first. So no doubt this student definitely focused on a topic and brought up the topic several times, maybe a little too much. But let's take a look at basically where they talk about making our own decisions, because we know this essay had to do with, especially based on this paragraph, about being able to make our own decisions. So right here, we've got, again, that decision of, however I think, or honestly, rather, I think we should be able to make our own decision because it is our life. So right here, we've got the topic being mentioned. And then some of us might even be successful with our own decision or not. You chose your own decision. You should not have to be limited in the choices that you make. And then so this is again bringing up the topic. And then they said some people might not like the fact that they can go over a certain amount of decisions they can make. I'm going to talk about that part a little bit later. So again, bringing up the choices. Then we've got, it is your decision. We are in today's world, we are not limited in our decisions. We can make millions of decisions in our life and make good decisions at least. So, I mean, this whole section from here to here, and we are responsible enough to make our own decisions. I mean, essentially, this whole section right here is all about, and again, sorry, writers, it looks a little bumpy there. Here it's looking like, again, all this is bringing up the decisions, and it's just good to see again how much this topic is brought up. And then it says, we should need to have someone near us telling you you have gone over your limit of decisions. If you are mature enough to do the right things, you are old enough to make your own decisions, but the good ones. Yes, some people would choose the wrong decision, but it was their choice, their own choice. So again, bringing up this idea of decisions in this section here. Then I am against us people today having to be limited in the choices you make. I agree that it is better to be just responsible and make and choose your own decision. You are an adult. And again, looking at decisions. And now some people will be totally against that, and we'll talk about how that student is bringing up the counterpoint. But I am very thankful that now, the time I'm living in, we make and choose our own decisions. We do not need anyone telling us what we can do. In conclusion, today we do not have to be limited over the choices we make. We can make and choose our own decisions. We are free to make and choose our own decisions. So really, this whole section is also about the topic, even this part here. So what's interesting is if I'm going to go with yellow. Here is really, and I know I'm crossing it out, right, writers? But I just want you to kind of visually see where the student is not talking about the topic or is bringing up maybe a counter argument. And this is here. And again, I'm sort of crossing through it. But I do this because, as you can see, this student just repeated, it's great that they brought up the topic, but if you just look at what's in yellow, you can sort of see that this student just brought up the topic too many times. And so we are attacked with the topic over and over again, which is not always a bad thing. And I like how they, started on the topic and ended on the topic. But the issue is it's just brought up so many times that it ends up taking away from the essay. Now, in the yellow part, what I wanted to point out was that the student did bring up what would be considered the counter argument. So they brought up the counterpoint. And in that case, that is working to their advantage because they looked at it from another person's perspective. So I'm going to clear this. And again, I want to bring up where they bring up the counter argument. And it starts really right here. Some people might not like the fact that they cannot go over a certain amount of decisions they can make. So right here in this section, the student creates or makes a counter argument, which is good. You should want to do that. That's important when you're writing an argumentative essay. And then they bring it up again here. Now, some people will be totally against that. And so again, bringing up the counter argument, and that's good. And then they bring it up again. Yes, some people will choose the wrong decision, but it was their own choice. And so they did bring up the counter argument in at least 3 different places. And that's, again, a positive. Now I'm going to clear the screen again. And we've got some areas where, again, the student takes their position, that they are clear on how they feel about the topic. Meaning, do they support the topic or are they against the topic? And it says, first sentence, honestly, I think we should be able to make our own decisions because it is our life. So here the student takes a position. Then they bring it up again. In conclusion, today we do not have to be limited over the choices we make. We can make and choose our own decisions. We are free to make and choose our own decisions. So again, the student emphasizes their position, and that's a positive. Another good point or good area was where they at least brought up an example. One example is you are going to a store to buy groceries. You see a delicious candy bar. You are not sure if you should take it. It is your decision. In today's world, we are not limited on our decisions. So, in this section here, the student did actually give an example of an example of a decision. Now, the only issue with the example is that it's very juvenile, might be a word that I might say, or elementary, because you're talking about a candy bar. And if you think about it, you're in a testing environment, you're writing an Accuplacer Writeplacer essay, and you're in high school looking to go to college. So bringing up a candy bar just seems overly simplistic. Now, if the student had brought up that you were diabetic, that would be a very different example. Or maybe there's an issue involving obesity. That, again, is a very different context. With that said, not too bad in the grammar area. Some pretty good examples of comma usage. I mean, right here, this comma was actually not needed because the student was making what would be considered a complex sentence. A couple of spots, we had some hiccups, especially in the middle, as far as it was just, there were some rough patches. And it was almost like the student had skipped some words. And in the section where it says, maybe you should just think over it or just overthink it and make the good decisions at least, we don't really know what that says. And it's a little bit confusing. And it says, we are responsible enough to make our own decisions. And then we should need to have someone near us telling you have gone over your limit of decisions. That sounds a bit awkward and what I call clunky. In this case, moving from we to you sounds awkward. So you want to try to stay with, if you're going with you, second person, then stick with you the whole time. Try to stay in one perspective rather than jumping back and forth, because that can make your writing jumpy and confusing. So with that said, those are just some general comments that I would make about this essay for sample essay number 1 with a score of 3. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to sample essay number 2. This essay also scored a 3. We are limited in the choices that we can make by a number of things. First, we are restricted by our government, who sets rules that we have to abide by. Next is our schools, because they set a certain standard on our classes and we have to meet their requirements, and also we are limited in our actions when we are at work. Our government has laws that we have to go by, or we will be fined or punished for not abiding them. Hitler came up with all sorts of rules and conditions, and if they weren't followed, he would have the citizen executed. In our school, we don't have very much freedom in choosing which courses we want to take, because we have so many mandatory ones that has to be taken in order to get enough credits to graduate, such as 3 years of math, 4 years English, and 3 years of reading and writing. And last but not least, when you get a job, nearly every employer has a certain code that you have to go by in order to work for them. Some companies have started banning you from bringing your Bible to work to read on your break or talking religion to your coworkers. So all in all, I think we are limited in the choices we can make by our government, schools, and our employers. So writers, this essay is interesting for a number of reasons. Number 1, it was shorter than the previous one, significantly shorter, and it also scored a 3. And I love that about this essay, because I think it's important for students to understand that it's not how much you write, it's what you do with the amount that you write. It's what you do in your writing that counts. So sometimes, again, students are always taught, well, the more the better. But in writing, honestly, I believe the opposite is true. Less is more. As long as you are focused and very specific, you will find that you will go further in your writing if you actually take the time to really hone in on uh, editing what you've written and hyper focus on that rather than just writing for the sake of writing. And this is an excellent example of that, that even though this essay was much shorter than the previous one, it did a better job of looking at, giving us very specific examples. And again, just staying super on topic, and just again, hyper focused on what the topic is really about with very specific examples. So I know that usually at the end of these videos, I sort of do a compare and contrast, but I'm going to go ahead and change it up here and just make that point right away between these two essays. One of the things that I appreciate about this essay, unlike any of the other essays I've read thus far through Accuplacer Writeplacer, this one has many, many examples. So let's take a look at what the student specifically did well. First sentence, they bring up, we are limited in the choices that we can make by a number of things. So they do bring up the topic in saying we are limited in the choices that we can make. And that's great. Then they go through and explain that we can make by a number of things. And then they follow that things up with very specific examples. Yes, writers, I absolutely detest the word things in writing. And I tell you, it's just one of those words that if you're saying things and stuff, take it out of your writing. I do have an issue with that for this student. But again, they go into specific examples right after that. When they say, first, we are restricted by our government, who sets rules that we have to abide by. So again, they bring up a specific example, restrictions by government, and then setting rules that we have to abide by. Because government would be considered more of an object, they should have said which sets rules rather than who. And it would have been awesome if the student had then brought up very specific examples of rules that involve the government. For example, one rule in certain states is, having to wait until you're 16 to get your driver's license. That would be a very specific example, and to follow up with that sentence. In addition, it's age appropriate. And so again, a lot of you are 16, 17, years old if you're in high school and you're writing an Accuplacer Writeplacer essay, and that's a specific rule that applies to you, a specific government rule. So that would have been an awesome follow-up right after this sentence. But again, at least they gave us an example of something. And then the student goes on to say, next is our schools, because they set a certain standard on our classes and we have to meet their requirements. And so again, this idea of setting us up in the school setting, certain standards with classes and meeting those requirements. Now, again, they bring up schools and they almost pretend that schools are people. But again, a school is sort of an object or a thing. So which set up standards? And then they go into, then they also bring up, also, we are limited in our actions when we are at work. So essentially, they bring up, government, schools, and work. Then they start to go into more specifics, and that is this idea of our government has laws that we have to go by or we will be fined or punished for not abiding by them. Hitler came up with all sorts of rules and conditions, and if they weren't followed, he would have the citizen executed. So essentially, what the student did here is they gave the example of the government that would have been great right after that sentence of first. So I think it's one of those where, if they wanted to set it up like a 3-paragraph essay, they could have set that part up right after the government, which sets rules that we have to abide by. Then they go into the next specific example by bringing up, in our schools, we don't have very much freedom in choosing. And I think they meant in choosing which courses we want to take, because we have so many mandatory ones that have to be taken in order to get enough credits to graduate, such as 3 years of math, 4 years of English, 4 years English, and 3 years of reading and writing. Now, the issue with this one is definitely it is a run-on sentence. And I know that because there's really no period at all until the very end, and we needed some breathing room. This sentence, again, would have been better served right after this idea of the requirements right here. And then their last part, using a different color here. And last but not least, when you get a job, nearly every employer has a certain code that you have to go by in order to work for them. Some companies have started banning you from bringing your Bible to work to read on your break or talking religion to your coworkers. So again, very specific examples in this section here, which again would have been well served after the work. And so it's almost like this student, could have made what would be either a 3-paragraph essay or a 1-3-1, where they could have had a 1 or 2 sentence introduction and then had 1 paragraph focused on government rules, the next paragraph focused on school rules, and then the last paragraph focused on employer rules, and then had like a 2 or 3 sentence conclusion. I argue that you don't need to have this super long intro and conclusion to make a strong essay. And I think if the student had actually broken this up into very specific paragraphs, they probably would have moved up to a higher score. This is one of those great examples of less is more, and examples really level up your writing. This student did finally sort of bring up their position. So all in all, I think we are limited in the choices we can make. And in this one, it says we are limited in the choices we make. But I like how this student, I'm going to clear the screen, right, writers, actually used, I think we are limited in the choices we can make. So in this last sentence, they finally take a position on the topic. And I think that they should have started with, I think we are limited in the choices we can make, because it's never really stated in the first sentence. And when you're writing an argumentative essay, you should definitely be very clear on the position that you are taking. Now, what they did not do is they did not bring up the counter arguments. So no counter arguments are presented. And similar to the first essay, while the topic is discussed, the prompt is never really discussed. Not the prompt per se, but the text evidence that is given to use to support the prompt or this idea of limited in choices is never brought up. It's never brought up in the first essay, and it's never brought up in this essay. Instead, the student simply takes a position on the prompt / topic, but they never actually use text evidence that's provided by Accuplacer Writeplacer to use to stitch or weave into their essay. And going back to, again, one of the positives of this essay over the other essay is, again, examples. This particular essay is rich in specific examples. Yes, they made some errors. Yes, they changed point of views or perspectives. They had some run-ons and, 3, 4, 3 that should have been written out. They should have used some commas, added in some words. But again, the specificity of the examples helped their score. So I hope, right, writers, that again, sort of going over these examples of essays that did not score well help you understand when you receive your own feedback and you're looking at it and you're like, why did I score a 3? Why did I score this, have this number? That this will help you to enhance and improve and level up your own essay when you take the Accuplacer Writeplacer test, on a second go around, third go around. Again, perfect practice makes perfect, but also, taking the time to figure out, again, how do I level this essay up? Thank you, Write Writers, for watching this video. Again, I hope that it ensures your success. And I wanted to do a shout out to JB. And I say J period B period because I don't want to necessarily call you out by name because you may not feel comfortable with that. So I'll just sort of keep it anonymous here. But I saw your subscription, JB. And again, I really appreciate it. All right. Take care, Write Writers. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.